Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to see you guys all here. So when Pep asked me to speak at the conference, I called my talk Algorithmic Content Analysis and High Impact SEO Upgrades, because this is what I do. I rank websites on Google, I test, I figure out what are the right ranking factors. And then after hanging out with you guys for 2 days, I thought I might as well have called my talk SEO Testing and Competitive Google Optimization. Because you guys are testing, what users are doing, how can you increase your conversion rate, how does it work, how do we get them to show the behavior that we want to see. I'm basically doing the same with Google by reviewing the competitors and figuring out what are they doing right, and then building SEO strategies from there. And because I'm the first person talking about, how to grow organic traffic and SEO in here, I just quickly, want to put us all on the same page. Because when we're talking about SEO, many people talk about rankings and how can I be ranking successfully. And as you know, you're only really successful in SEO once you're ranking, let's say, in the top 5 position, because this is where more than 80% of all traffic is. So the question is, how do I make it to the top 5 position, right? And being on page 1 of Google means you're the most relevant answer to a search query. So Google's purpose is to organize and sort information based on relevance. So in short, if you're more relevant, you're going to be in a top position. Now, Google is actually not a human. Google is actually an algorithm, which means Google doesn't read and comprehend content like your users would, which means if you want to be relevant in Google's eyes, you want to be optimizing ranking factors. And the more of those ranking factors you can tick off and optimize, the better you're going to perform. And ranking factors include things, like technical SEO, like your site structure, how is it all laid out. It includes content, and it includes backlinks. So today I want to be talking about content and how to learn what Google would like to see from your content creation. And I think Andre yesterday said, or was introduced, that he was playing poker professionally, so he can probably relate to that. But this is how SEO feels for many people. You have some cards in your hand, there are some cards on the table, and you're trying to predict what is going on. You're constantly trying to count cards, make calculation, you're trying to understand which move to make. And the less you understand this, the more complicated the game with Google seems, and the more unclear it is what is actually happening. And the more unclear it gets, what are the ranking factors I should be optimizing and how. The reality is, though, that when playing poker with Google, Google is already showing their hand. So what I mean by that is, yes, the Google algorithm is a black box. It's not clear. It's even black magic, if you want to say so. But the reality is Google is showing their hand, which means if we want to understand what Google would like to see, if we want to understand how to rank well, we got to look on page 1. Because the answer is hidden in plain sight. What Google wants to see is on page 1. So if we can make that competitive analysis and optimize and test accordingly, we are going to be able to appear on page 1 as well. So, of course, understanding every step of the process of Google, receiving a search query and then within milliseconds, returning a search results by, figuring out what's the intent of the query, what's the most relevant page out of a billion pages on the web, and then probably filtering it based on your location, on your previous search history and your web speed. It's a sophisticated process that most of the Google engineers probably don't understand. But what we can study is cause and effect. We can study the search term that people enter and the page 1 that Google returns, and we can learn what is the difference between keywords and what is it that Google specifically would like to see for your keywords that you're trying to rank for. So this is a talk on content analysis. And we heard yesterday a lot about content style, brand voice, etc. So what I'm talking about is content in the sense of how can you tweak it for Google too, right? I'm very much a fan of mindful marketing, high quality content, and making sure it's user-centric. But on top of that, I would recommend you to look into what Google wants as well. Because writing 1,000 words of content in an optimized headline 1, it's good best case practice, it's probably in the ballpark figure of what you're doing, and statistically speaking, it's probably the right advice for a keyword. Most likely it's not the right advice for your keyword. And so I want to invite you to start making keyword-specific strategies when it comes to SEO. And basically, very similar to the testing that you guys working on when it's about conversion rate, I want to invite you to apply a very scientific mindset to your SEO operation as well, right? So I'm going to walk you very practically through the process of me figuring out what's the right strategy for a specific keyword. So we're going to figure out, what's the purpose or goal that we want to be working on? What are the competitors doing successfully? What are they doing? And then testing the hypothesis of what they're doing right to improve our rankings as well. And like I said, the major difference between this is that when you guys are testing conversion factors for humans, we're testing ranking factors for Google. And I want to make a strong point, like we are hearing a lot of things talking these days about rank brain, user engagement metrics, AI, natural language processing. Is Google really reading content? But I want to put some emphasis on the fact that Google is not reading content like humans yet. And Google's algorithm is an algorithm, and we have to treat it like that in our optimization. So here's the process. This is what I do to give you guys an idea. And I'm going to use a case study to illustrate how you can run an SEO test like that. Basically, the nicest pages to optimize for any SEO campaign, not just for SEO testing, is usually those keywords on pages that are stuck somewhere on the bottom of page 1, page 2, or 3, or 4. Because people sometimes think like, my page is not ranking at all. This is the page I should be working on. But if the page has like 0 positive, results from Google, no interest from Google whatsoever, you're just banging your head against the wall for now. You have a better return on investment if you work on those pages where you're on page 2, 3, or 4, which is Google telling you is, we find you kind of relevant. We kind of like you. So if you can improve those pages, you're going to have a bigger impact. It's more likely to push those to the top than all those pages that are just sitting there half dead, not ranking at all. And the other pages that are actually really fun to optimize for content are the ones that already have links, right? Links are hard to acquire. It's a very specific asset that takes a lot of work to get. So if you go into Google Search Console and you find the pages that already have links and then improve the content, that's also a really smart way to find your target pages as well. And the idea is that you want to have a target keyword, let's say cluster, because it's not about optimizing one page for one keyword, but for a cluster of keywords or a topic, and I'm going to be talking about this more. So we want one keyword cluster per target page, and then one target page per keyword cluster, right? So that's the idea, because if Google's looking for the most relevant page on the web, you're already competing with billions of pages on the web to be the most relevant answer. You don't want to confuse Google and compete with yourself by telling Google, I have 5 posts about this. Go figure which one matters the most. You want to make it very obvious and very clear which one is the one that you want to be ranking for a specific keyword cluster. Think of Google as a very OCD personality, and it got to be very clear which one is the one. So if you know your page that is kind of stuck on page 4, try to figure out what are your competitors that are ranking successfully on page 1, right? It's very much about the competitive analysis and understanding what do those pages on page 1 have in common. Now here's an important thing. When you're trying to find your competitors for SEO, compare apples with apples. So if you're an e-commerce store and you're trying to rank a product page, compare yourself with another product page, not a skyscraper. Right? If you're comparing your 500-word product page with a 15,000-word skyscraper, the data is going to be completely off, and you're not going to be able to implement the recommendations. So compare blog posts with blog posts, product pages with product pages, category pages with category pages. Now you might be saying, well, I'm trying to rank a product page, but everyone on page 1 is a blog post. Well, that should be a sign that you shouldn't be ranking a product page, right? Because Google understands that intent behind the keyword you're trying to rank for requires a blog post. So this is really what you want to be looking at. Is like, does my content type match the content types on page 1? And then compare yourself to pages of the similar content type. I wrote an article on this on Search Engine Journal. I actually link all the resources in this link in here because I know that you guys are not going to type the super long link. It's called How to Rank Cannabis Content and SEO Deep Dive. Be assured it also works for non-cannabis content, right? It's like content marketing for SEO, and I go into that in greater detail. But let's stick with it for fun for a little bit. So this is page 1 for cannabis tincture. Right? And as we can see, except for number 8. Number 8 is a product. All the other ones are kind of like skyscraper guides, blog posts. So all the other ones are informational content, educational content. So we're already learning by looking at page 1 that this is the type of content that Google would like to see. Now, I mentioned the word intent. The interesting thing is the keyword I typed in to get this search result is actually best cannabis tincture. So if we were doing the old SEO, we would expect every headline, every URL to have best cannabis tincture in it. And we can see a few of them have the word best actually, in their page title, but a lot of them don't. Which is that Google already understands if people are looking for cannabis tincture, best cannabis tincture, this kind of like broad terms, in their mind, they're in a research phase, right? They're trying to understand what's out there, what's available, what's going on. And Google understands that these pages serve the same intent as best cannabis tincture. Which kind of leads to the question, what's a keyword anyway, if that is true? So normally when we talk about keyword, we usually mean, several words. It's not a single word, so it's more like keywords. But then normally what we mean when we say keyword, we mean the search term or the search query, so the thing that people type into Google. So that's your exact match keyword or your main or target keyword. Now this is another screenshot, from the actual SERPs, and I highlighted in yellow. So you guys can read it from the back. But what Google actually does is it bolds synonyms and variations. So Google tells you best cannabis tincture. It actually tells you, for example, that marijuana tincture is a variation or synonym, and that Google understands that those have the same intent as well, right? Like they have a similar purpose as well. And then there's tincture, cannabis tincture, best, and all kinds of THC-related terms. So what I want you to start thinking of today is that in the last 12 months especially is like the Google algorithm is trying to get very much behind intent, right? And Google is, like back 5 years ago, you would probably write 2 pages. You would write 1 page for cannabis tincture, 1 page for marijuana tincture, and Google would not understand that they're somehow related, right? The one would rank for marijuana tincture, the other one would rank for cannabis tincture. And now actually the same page, which covers both of the keywords, serves the same intent and need, and Google actually understands that they're related and that they belong on 1 page. So this is an important thing to realize, that because people still, when they talk about on-page SEO, about content optimization, they still think it really matters to update your exact match keyword. There have been mysteries about keyword density and that sort of thing. But as a rule of thumb, with your pages today, is probably your exact match keywords is way over-optimized, and all your variations and synonyms are very much under-optimized. As a rule of thumb, this is what we're seeing today the most. And it's, as I said, when we're talking about cannabis tincture, like this example, we're obviously in the awareness, interest, or consideration phase. So this type of keyword, they serve the same intent. So if keywords have a similar intent, you kind of want to return the same page, the same entity for Google. And like the easiest way to figure out what are synonyms that Google already understands is by actually typing it in the search and then figuring out which words are being displayed in bold. All right, let's think. You find your target page, you figure out what content type you have to use, product page, category page, blog post. You figured out let's say 5 to 7 competitors on page 1 that have the same content type, what we're now trying to understand is what's the difference between me on page 4 and those on page 1? Where am I deficient in my SEO efforts? And what do those pages on page 1 have in common? This is what I would say is an inconclusive result for a factor. So let's say factor 1 is keyword in headline 1. And then on the horizontal scale, you can see like position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And you can see that the appearance of this factor is completely random. So we can't draw any conclusion in terms of, is it going to help me or not help me to optimize this factor? We're not sure. However, if you see a result like this, where, for example, factor 2, keyword and headline 2, all the pages in the top positions are doing that, and you're not doing that, there's probably a strong correlation between you updating that ranking factor and you ranking better as well. Now, in theory, what you would be doing is you would be, figuring out word count, images in the page, internal links, keyword placement, etc. by counting. Like you actually counting your page and then counting the competitors and then figure out what's going on. Now that's an awful process, obviously. So there have been a bunch of tools on the market in the last year or two. And they're kind of the new kids on the block that all of a sudden made on-page SEO sexy again. Because I think for most people, on-page SEO is kind of like an awkward homework where you get an export from Screaming Frog and you're like, duplicate meta description. You're like, okay, updating, it's the ugly duckling of the SEO. But for the reason that those tools are coming out and they're actually using a statistical analysis and they kind of like go under the term correlational SEO, allow you to make a competitive analysis and then do all the work for you, on-page SEO has been on the rise a lot. So the idea is that if you track your own page and then your competitors into one of those tools, they're going to do the work of counting for you and figuring out which ones are the ranking factor that are statistically relevant. So this is something that then you can pass on to your content writers, your developer, etc., to update the pages accordingly. And then the idea is obviously that you get results on which ranking factors you should be optimizing. You set up an experiment as in, I will do it, I rewrite my content, and I wait. So here's the thing, like because Google is slow, you probably will want to wait at least, let's say, 3 weeks after making an update to figure out if you're actually getting a lift in rankings. And how this could look like is like this. So coming back to the cannabis tincture, what I'm looking here is at the variations of keywords and not the exact match, because we saw that putting best cannabis tincture is not what's going to move the needle. But basically it gives you an idea for those variations that are listed on the top. What are my competitors doing, right? So they're minimum using, for example, the variations in the meta title twice and maximal 4 times. So I know if I'm using variations of the keyword 3 times in my meta page title, I'm competitive with those people that are currently ranking successfully. And it basically gives me a very easy list of homeworks, of things that I can optimize to perform better. And for example, they also return to you a recommendation on word count. So you can adjust your word count to that, what is already working in Google today. Now, the beautiful thing is, as I think Neville said on the first day, like rewriting content, updating content, this is a lot of work. This stuff is normally quite easy, right? It's something that you can give to your writer or your editor and they can start implementing that. And if you take home, one thing is probably, take your 5 free credits or whatever you get when signing up for the tool for free and just knock out a few of these recommendations, give it 3 weeks of time and see your lift in rankings and kind of like wrap your head around the methodology. In terms of the insights that we're creating, like what is it that we're trying to look for, or what is it that we need, to learn about this process, is the idea between definite proof and good enough. So these tools, they all work with correlation, right? And for example, Quora is a fantastic tool because it can not only do a content analysis, it also does a backlink analysis and technical analysis. And in that sense, it's probably the most sophisticated tool. But the idea is that we're looking for a fast, quick, efficient way to find gaps. And this is what those tools are good for. SEO is never really about getting 100% perfect. It's about moving the needle, making some tweaks, getting better, right? And especially with this, it's about testing and improving. So normally when I do this type of thing is I run a page through the tools, I optimize all the exact match keywords, I wait, I then optimize all the variations, I wait, and then maybe from there, there's also the topic of like contextual keywords or LSI keywords and TF-IDF. That allow you to kind of like make a third iteration and kind of get closer and closer and closer to what Google would like to see. And I think this is kind of like my tip for you guys to keep in mind. People are really overdoing it with the exact match keywords. Still today, you would think that the awkward SEO text where the exact match keyword is hammered into every subheadline, into every paragraph, that would have died 5 years ago. Sadly, it's still around. It's really much more about getting your variations right, the context right, the intent right these days. And the other thing is work on your deficiencies. Now, this is a hypothesis, a theory that we've had kind of in our circle of nerds and SEOs, is that let's say you're really strong in like backlinks and headline 1, but all your subheadlines, your image alt text, your lists, your bold italics are super deficient, that you're basically, the deficient factors are gonna decrease the impact of the factors where you're doing well. So what you wanna do is you wanna, increase your deficient factors to kind of like level the game and actually allow those good performing factors to rise. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you're still gonna see pages ranking with like horrendous on-page SEO and that are insanely keyword stuffed, and you're like, how could they be ranking? It's probably because all their factors are kind of like equally well performing. So this would be kind of like the process to go through is we're trying to find the competitors of the same content type. We're trying to understand what have they been doing in their content, in their on-page SEO, and then we're trying to replicate that and see if we can rank better as well. Now, the brands and content creators are going to be asking, like, but what about quality? Like, this is like very quantitative learnings in terms of I'm putting keywords a bit more often and then I'm implementing it. The main thing that I would like you guys to understand in terms of content quality and getting it right for Google is that you need to start respecting intent, relevance, structure, and context. What I'm saying by that is avoid keyword cannibalization, right? Avoid ranking several pages for the same keyword. And then also avoid content cannibalization. So I want to explain that with something that might be, more obvious. Let's say we have a website on food. And then we can break this down, into a section or category or silo about fruit and vegetables, and another one about meat. And then obviously within fruit and vegetables, there's fruit and vegetables, and within fruit, there's apples, bananas, oranges. If on your banana page, you talk about apples all the time, and then on your apple page, you talk about apple, and then you run out of a content idea, so on your fruit page, you talk about apples, that's content cannibalization. So not only is there a chance that all these pages accidentally rank for apples, but it's also Google understanding that you're basically rewriting the same stuff over and over again. So what you want to be doing is that for each of these pages, you actually want to find an original angle and make sure that on the apples page, you're only talking about apples, and on the oranges page, you're only talking about oranges. And then people ask, like, what can I actually talk about? There's not 1,500 words to say about apples. Well, when we talk about food, for example, I typed in chicken tikka masala into this tool, which is called Answer the Public. So this kind of like does a lot of the homework for you in terms of like, what are questions that people have. And it's a good go-to to make sure that in your chicken tikka masala page, you're only writing about that specific topic and actually relevant stuff, and you're not, starting to talk about Indian cuisine because you're running out of ideas on what to talk about the recipe. Speaking of Indian cuisine, other common Indian concept, tantra. So this is probably me living in Bali for 2 years, and this is why this is my example, and why tantra. So this is a page, an orphan page, no internal links, that is ranking on my old agency's website. So it's an SEO's agency page, website, with a page about tantra. So no context, no relevance. has about 400 searches per month. You know, eat, pray, love, and everything like the yogis that are coming to Bali. So this page is ranking position 25, 35. It's not amazing, but I mean, considering it's an orphan page that is sitting on an agency side, it's probably all right. What else do you notice about this page? Yeah, so it's lorem ipsum dummy content. And I don't want to break the heart of the content creators, but the only thing that we did here is optimize the on-page SEO factors, like I showed you in my experiment. And just by putting the keywords and the variations in the right spot, we're ranking on page 1 for that. Now, the happy end to this story is that my friend Drew, who's actually a sexual healer, wrote the same piece with proper content, and he's ranking in the top 3 like he should be. What's my point there? We're optimizing for an algorithm, not a human, right? Google does not understand content. And okay, ranking on page 2 or 3 is maybe not that impressive, but I'm in a community SEOs where we've been doing this pretty rigorously for 3 or 4 years. I know many people who've been ranking in the top 3 with lorem ipsum pages for a long, long time. Until last November, when Search Engine Journal published this article, and Google wiped out all lorem ipsum pages within 2 hours after this article was published. So I suppose the learning is Google does not understand content yet, or it doesn't understand it well for queries with low search volume, etc. That has to do something with the cost of the natural language processing algorithms, and it's gonna come for sure, but this is about where we're at today. So the learning is not to go out and throw up lorem ipsum pages, though I do recommend it, kind of for the sake of the experiment and the intellectual challenge. The learning is that you can have incredible benefits and movements by just getting your on-page SEO right. Like this competitive analysis and doing what those successful pages are doing and getting it right is extremely powerful, right? This is why I initially called it high-impact SEO upgrades, because it's easy work, it's something that can be done very efficiently, it's something that is very procedural and that yields great benefits. And Carl already gave me the sign, so here's kind of like the summary of this. Your competitors rank your website, and what I mean by that, it's only as hard or easy to rank as your competitors are well optimized. So if you can play, you know, with the cool kids on page 1, you're going to be ranking successfully. If you study what Google would like to see, if you realize that you don't have to make up an SEO strategy, you know? It's not about your intuition or your gut feeling. It's about looking on page 1, finding, you know, the content type that's out there, seeing how is this content optimized, obviously also looking like how many links do they have, and then put out something that is comparable, and as Neville said before, make it, you know, like 20% better. This is how you start ranking in the top position. And don't underestimate kind of like the ugly stepsister or on-page SEO and actually getting your keyword variations right. I want to put emphasis again on this because I don't want you to go away from an SEO talk in 2019 and, you know, tell your coworkers, she told me to put the keyword more often. I'm telling you, Google is not better at understanding variations and synonyms, and you need to use those more often. You know, try to take the time to understand what page 1 looks like, what Google would like to see. Test ranking factors, right? This is what it's all about. Have a play with it, you know, do an experiment, optimize something, tweak something, see what happens, and then iterate and improve from there. It's really, really build, measure, learn. So this is my story of today in terms of how you can do a competitive, you know, Google ranking test, how you can, you know, start playing with your SEO. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And this is me.